Clemson or Miami? Who does the ACC truly run through?
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Clemson podcast. We are so grateful that you're joining the show. Thanks for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every single day. I am your host, John Bivens. You can follow us over on Twitter at I am John Bivens, or you can follow us over on Twitter at LO_Clemson for the overall Locked On Twitter page. We are so grateful that you're joining us today here on Locked On Clemson. You're getting all sports, all passion, all the time, where it is we are bringing you everything you need to know regarding the Clemson Tigers athletics. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today is September 26th, this wet, stormy Thursday evening. We are going to be talking about who the ACC runs through, our weather update for this weekend, and the mailbag, where we're answering questions sent in by viewers like you. We're grateful for all our sponsors that make this show possible. For a full list of the sponsors, click the link below. Clemson or Miami? Who does the ACC truly run through? Who should be favored to win the ACC this year? I'm going to go ahead and answer that right away, right? Who does the ACC run through? Well, it is impossible for the ACC to run through a team that has never won the ACC championship game. Miami has never won an ACC football championship game, and because of that, the ACC can't run through them. It doesn't matter if no one else had won a game and they've been undefeated. ACC doesn't run through them because they haven't won it before. So we'll go ahead and mark that one off. Don't need a full segment to talk about that. We'll talk about that. No, but in reality, when we're talking about this year, who should be favored? Is it truly down to those two teams? Right now, everyone is talking about the ACC has been flipped on its head. Walking into this season, a lot of people had Clemson as low as 4, even 5. I saw 5 at one point for the preseason ACC rankings. And majority of people had the following list. They had Florida State, then they had Miami. Then I averaged 3 through 5, rotated between 3 different teams: Clemson, NC State, and Louisville. Majority of the time, that's 4 through 6. So for top 3, I said that right. Florida State number 1, Miami number 2, and then Clemson 3 or 4 or 5, Louisville 3, 4, 5, NC State 3, 4, 5. So far this year, 2 of those teams look awful. Florida State is celebrating their first win of the year after starting off the year very poorly, losing a lot of games right off the bat, 0-3, but they won a game. So they're celebrating that. But overall, Florida State has looked terrible. Haven't had the offense that everyone thought they would have. Their defense has struggled much more than what everyone thought they would. They've really struggled this year. NC State has also been a team that has underwhelmed. They played an FCS opponent to start the season in Western Carolina and struggled with them for the majority of the game. Played another non-major team and did not look good there against LA Tech. I believe it was LA Tech. Their backup quarterback, CJ Bailey, had to come and win that when Grayson McCall got hurt. Tennessee, they got smashed by. Wasn't even close. And then Clemson, they got smashed by. They scored a lot in the fourth quarter when we had our water boys playing safety. But very, very different than what their expectations were. 3 of those top 5 teams still look good. Miami looks good this year. Clemson looks good this year. And Louisville looks good this year. I firmly believe that it's down to those 3 for the ACC, who's going to be playing in the ACC tournament. And the realistic story is I really believe it's going to be Miami and Clemson in it. Louisville plays Miami and they play Clemson. Miami and Clemson do not play this year unless they face each other in the ACC championship game. So I believe it's down to those 2. Who should be favored? Right now, if you go on all of our betting FanDuel is one of our betting partners. If you go on FanDuel and look at who is favored to win the ACC, Miami is favored right now. Is that accurate? Should that be the case? Should that be the situation? Well, let's look at the team history. Let's look at so far Miami's scheduled. So far they're 4-0. They're sitting really pretty at 4-0 right now. I believe they have one credible win on their schedule. They beat Florida 41-17 in Florida. Now, look, the Gators are not who they used to be, but they're still an SEC opponent, still a good team. That's a good win. Then they played Florida A&M at home, won them 56-9. Played Ball State at home, won 62-0. I don't care who you are. If you're playing a D1 team and you win 62-0, that's impressive. And then they went to USF down in Tampa, had to travel all the way to Tampa, almost as far as they have to travel for a home game. But sorry, bad joke. But anyway, they played USF in Tampa and won that game 50-15. If you don't understand that joke I made, Miami does not have a home stadium on their campus. They travel to Hard Rock Stadium where Miami Dolphins play, and that's their home field. So they have to travel across town to their own home stadium. So a little embarrassing, but little poking fun at the Hurricanes right there. Maybe you shouldn't say hurricane with the storm going on. But either way, Miami looks impressive through their first 4 games. Through the first 4 games, they are averaging, not giving up a lot of points at all, with 17, 9, 0, and 15. And they've scored over 50 points in 3 of their 4 games, with 41 their 4th. So they're averaging over 51 points over 50 points per game. They look solid so far. I know who they've scheduled has not been the greatest. Clemson's honestly hasn't been the best either. We played Georgia, which was a great opponent, but we did not look good at all against them. And then we looked great against App State and NC State. So I would say the only difference is Miami won a good game and Clemson lost to the best team in the nation. Other than that, Florida in Ball State and USF, I would say those are equivalent to the App State game. I would say NC State's better than those 3, but they're not on the level of Florida State. So if that's how you're ranking opponents, that's where it's at. But if you're looking at our overall, what the teams are doing statistical-wise, the teams look very similar. When it comes to yards per game, they're both top 4 in the ACC. Miami is number 1 they're averaging 600 yards per game right now. Clemson's 475. Passing yards, Miami is throwing the ball everywhere. Over 400 passing yards per game. Clemson's sitting at 285. Rushing, very similar. Miami's averaging 200 rush yards per game. Clemson's averaging 189. So very similar there. And then points per game, like we talked about, Miami's averaging 52 points a game. Clemson is averaging 42. When you look at defense, again, this is where it looks a little different. Clemson is averaging much more yards per game. And I will say Clemson plays a lot more players than Miami. When Clemson gets up big in the second half, their starters don't see the field. They put in backups and reserve to build that depth, which a couple of our commenters over on YouTube have pointed out. So points per game, Clemson's average 415 allowed per game. Miami's only allowing 232, but they keep their starters in the majority of the game. Passing yards per game, Miami is averaging 168 allowed, 3rd best in the conference. Clemson's allowing 250 per game. Rush yards per game, Miami's the 2nd lowest, only behind Stanford, who we play this Saturday at 64. Clemson's 165. And then points per game, Miami is allowing 10.3 points a game. Clemson is allowing 29.7. But the only game we've really allowed points was against Georgia. The rest have been against our backup reserve. So that data is a little skewed right there. But overall, here's what we think. I think that right now, Clemson should be favored to win the ACC. They're not going to be, and I understand that. Miami is going to be favored as long as they keep winning. No, it doesn't matter if Clemson wins out. If Miami wins out, Miami will be favored against us to win the ACC championship game. But they shouldn't be. Clemson is finding the groove. They're starting to look like old-time Clemson, like getting back to their true form. Either way, these 2 teams are the best in the league. Louisville's still up there. Louisville deserves to be recognized as a good team. And we'll get to Louisville. We'll talk more specifically about them when we get to our Louisville matchup here in a couple weeks. But when you look at Clemson's roster, when you look at Miami's roster, I don't think Louisville matches up to them. So to answer the question, who's the ACC run through? Well, it still runs through Clemson. Who's won the most ACC championship games? Who's won the most recently? Clemson. Runs through Clemson. Who should be favored this year? That's up for debate. I would say Clemson. If I was a betting man, I would bet all in on Clemson for sure. But most people aren't, so we'll let you decide that for now. But either way, Clemson should be favored, in my opinion, to win the ACC. I think it looks really good for them moving forward this year to win the conference. Now let's move on to this weekend. If you can't hear, there's a major storm going on outside. And if you're a part of the Southeast, you're probably experiencing some level of this storm. How much does that truly affect the game this weekend? We'll talk about it in a second.
Jarvis Davis here for FanDuel. You heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So guess what? I'm about to tell you a little bit more. We got a little something just for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders. It doesn't matter, because guess what? With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Yes, every regular season out-of-market game. That is so dope. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit fanduel.com/lockedon. That's fanduel.com/lockedon, and make sure you download America's #1 sportsbook.
Weather is always a wild card when it comes to college football, but when a major storm is hitting the nation like it is right now, it impacts everything from travel to player safety to game plans to preparation. And both Clemson and Stanford are going to have to adjust on the fly, and it could completely change the dynamic of Saturday's game. Look, right now, there is a major storm happening. We are praying for the people of Florida, praying for the people all across the Southeast that are struggling with these flooding, with this major storm happening. Right now, we're recording this late on Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, and this is the biggest time. In our area, local area, there's already been major flooding. Roads have closed. Schools closed today on Thursday and tomorrow on Friday. It's causing a lot of problems. How much of that is going to impact Clemson? Before we dive into that, we just want to reiterate, we are praying for safety. If you're in an area that needs rescue, there's resources. Reach out if you need some kind of help in this time. There's definitely resources out there. But when it comes to football, this is impacting the game perhaps more than it's leading on. Look, when it comes to Clemson, let's talk about the field for a second. When it comes to Clemson, they are known as having one of the best fields when it comes to drainage and playing in the rain. Stanford coach even mentioned this earlier on in the week, talking about how Memorial Stadium is known for drainage. It's known for not puddling, for allowing the rain to seep through, not having the fields muddy. Known to be a really good field when it comes to the weather. That's known for. When Clemson's played games throughout the years, I remember that Notre Dame game, that was bad. And then the NC State game, when they played Notre Dame, that was a mud pile. Clemson doesn't experience that. When Clemson plays in the rain, it usually is it's slick. Of course, you're not going to get past slick. The ball's slick. It affects that level, but you're not having to fight the field. It doesn't create a lot of problems on the field other than it just being really wet. But it doesn't slide. Usually the water drains really quickly. There's not a lot of water holes or mud puddles or anything like that. It doesn't pull up. It drains really well. And so with that aspect, we shouldn't be worried about the field's consistency. When it comes to if it's going to rain or not during the game, everything that we're seeing right now is in our area, in Clemson's area, the rain is supposed to be really bad from about 2 o'clock Eastern on Thursday afternoon, so earlier this afternoon, to about 2 o'clock Eastern in the afternoon on Friday afternoon. The rain is supposed to pretty much end right after that. Saturday is supposed to be pretty clear for the majority of the day, even maybe a little bit of sun with some heavy winds. But Saturday looks good. So when it comes to that, I don't think there's any risk of the game getting canceled or postponed unless this major change happens in the weather. I think the biggest way this impacts the game is it impacts a lot of preparation. Right now, Clemson is unable to do the practicing that they usually do on Wednesday. They do an outdoor practice every week. They had to move that indoors for the last half of the practice due to weather. That's affecting that. Stanford was supposed to fly in today. I believe that still happened, but they were supposed to do a practice tomorrow at a local upstate high school beside Clemson, an outdoor field. They are no longer going to be able to practice there due to the weather, due to everything going on. So they're having to make a last-minute change on where to find a practice location. And this is already one. Let's remember, this is one that travel's already been a problem for Stanford. There's rumors going around that Clemson is having to do the Stanford team's laundry because they were unable to find somewhere that they could do laundry on their own place. So Clemson's literally doing the other team's laundry. We doing their laundry, right? There's an old phrase there. But this travel's already been a big problem. And now you're talking about weather. You're talking about major storms. I mean, a literal hurricane has hit Florida. We're in a tropical storm warning right now as we're speaking. There's major causes to this. There's flooding happening. In our local area alone, there's major roads closed. Flooding has happened all across the Southeast. So transportation is going to be a problem. There's a risk of losing power. Honestly, I'm praying right now that the power's not going to go out while I'm recording this or putting this out. Let me just upload this before it goes out. that's a real risk. So if the power goes out in the next day or two, what does that affect? If the hotel team, Stanford's hotel, loses power tonight, does that affect what goes on? If they lose power tomorrow, does that affect it? With the stadium, when it comes through it, or around the stadium, the chairs, there's probably going to be a lot of water on that. So if you're going to the game, be prepared to get your pants wet. Definitely wear some waterproof, a rain jacket or something like that. But the point is this. I don't think the rain necessarily is going to affect a lot of the whether or not the game can be played, because the game is also late on Saturday night, which should be plenty of time in order to clean up, to get dried off, that kind of aspect. It has changed a little bit of Clemson's plans. Clemson, this is our homecoming weekend. They do a Friday, every single Friday that before homecoming, they do a big tailgate party type thing. They've already moved that to the 16th, the Friday before our Nets home game against Virginia. So that has changed that. When it comes to the game, I don't think the game's going to be moved. I think that'll still be there. There's a chance for rain Saturday night. Now, if it rains on top of all this, if there's heavy rain while they're playing, that'll obviously affect game style. You'll be running the ball a little bit more, hard to grip the football, hard to get a good grip to throw the football. It'll cause it to be a rushing game. Now, that would benefit Stanford. As we talked about yesterday, Stanford has the best rushing defense in all of the ACC right now, with averaging just over 50 yards per game rushing. That would be probably beneficial to Stanford, but Clemson has a really good offensive line that has stepped up this season. I think we have a lot of threat on the ground with Phil Maffa, Jay Haynes, Cade Klubnik himself, get some wide receiver rushes as well with Bryant Wesco, Antonio Williams. We've got some rush game that I think would make it competitive, and we probably still be favored in that, but it could affect the game that way. But as far as moving the game, anything like that, I don't think we have to worry on anything like that, worry about the game getting postponed, anything of that sort. Overall, it's affecting preparation. It's affecting where they're practicing. It's affecting what's going to happen for the teams leading up to the game. I don't think it's affecting the game itself. There is a plan, though. Dabo has said that there is a plan that is out there for a contingency plan of what happens if they do have to postpone or cancel this game, when a makeup would be. So their chance is there right now. The current weather forecast in Clemson for Saturday night is cloudy with a little chance of showers. 64 degrees is the low. Wind light and variable. Chance of rain is 50% right now. So could be raining. That very much could be a possibility, but it doesn't look like the game is going to be canceled. So that's good news. Get prepared. If you have power, get prepared to watch the game on Saturday. Going to be exciting. But that's it for that segment. Let's move on and do something that we haven't done yet, but I'm so excited about. We love hearing from our fans. We love y'all. And so we're going to move in to a mailbag episode where we answer some of y'all's questions that you've submitted. Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play fantasy football or fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less the 2 or 6 players' stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. We want to place Prize Picks along Drewski, Joe Budden, MMA champ, Sean O'Malley. You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. You watch the games. Andy Dalton's kind of turned it around for Carolina Panthers. Do you think he's going to have more or less than a certain amount of yards? Go in there and click it. I think I'm hitting the more on Andy Dalton. If I was a betting man, that's what I do. Go through, play the fantasy sports. All you have to do is click the certain things. It can be fun. It can be simple. It's so much enjoyable to be able to do. Tyreek Hill for more than 90 receiving yards, or Dak Prescott for more than 263 yards. Those are some of the options you have to pick. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. Instantly get a reward. That code is LOCKEDONCollege on Prize Picks. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks runs your game. We love our fans. We love each and every one of you. We love our everyday listeners that join us, that are a part of this community with us. We are so grateful for each and every one of you. And one of our biggest things that we love to do is we love to interact with you. We love to be able to communicate with you. We very much enjoy just interacting, dropping in comments, getting in the comments on YouTube, reading all your messages on Twitter, getting in conversations with you on Twitter. And so today we get the chance to do one of our favorite things that we've gotten to do so far in the podcast, and that is a mailbag episode. we've received some questions from Twitter and on YouTube that we just want to read these questions off and then talk about them, go through what each of them has to say regarding these questions and answer them real quick. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on these, but we do want to read these questions and give some answers. The first one is from by name of Tyler. He says this. He says, do you think Cade Klubnik has made the leap this season, or does he still have room to grow? Yes. I'm going to say yes to both those. I think he has made a leap, and there's no doubt watching him play this season, he has made a huge leap from where he was last year. I still think he has room to go. I don't think we've seen his ceiling. I don't think we've seen the best of Cade Klubnik that we'll see. And I know that's hard to say as he's being a record breaker, but I think give him more time to grow, develop in this program. When we play Georgia or when we play a high-level program later on, we won't see what we saw in week 1. We'll truly see true Cade play against great performers, great opponents, other than just the low-level opponents or teams that are struggling like we've played already. So I'm going to say yes to both of your questions. Next is from Jeremy. With all, sorry, right, the wrong question. Let's see. Can Clemson make a deep run in the ACC tournament this year in basketball with the current roster? I'm going to say yes with a little hesitation. So switching up the basketball right here. Yeah, I do think they can make a run. My biggest concern is our bigs. I'm really worried about that hole that PJ Hall left. I know Victor Larkin came in from Cincinnati. He's supposed to be good. He's supposed to be able to fill that hole. PJ or Ian Shefflin's still there to be able to make a difference. So excited about him. I'm optimistic about what he can do. I am concerned not having that 1-2 punch of PJ Hall and Ian Shefflin. Can Victor Larkin really live up to that hole that PJ Hall left? Obviously, he's going to have to play very different. He's not the kind of player that PJ was. They're very much going to have to use him as a traditional 5. He's not the versatility that PJ had. So I'm going to say yes. I think they can make a run in the ACC tournament this year, but Brad's going to have to format a new scheme, a new system to fit the current roster. If he comes out and tries to play this year's team like last year's team, going to be very different. We don't have Joe Girard knocking down threes from half court. We don't have PJ Hall doing the incredible things that he always does. So he'll have to create a new system, but if he can do that, if he can adjust this team, which I have full faith he can, we'll see some success. This one is from Oliver. Do you think Clemson's offensive line has improved enough to dominate the rest of the season? Man, offensive line is the second part that I'm most excited about so far. They have truly made a huge difference. They're giving time. They're not getting embarrassed a little bit. We're not allowing a lot of pressure. I'm really happy with the offensive line. And so, yeah, I think they've improved enough where I don't think this is just because it's minor opponents. I think our offensive line looked good against Georgia. There was a couple times Georgia broke through, but for the most part, we held our own. I know our rush game was a little weak against them, but I honestly, yeah, I think our offensive line has improved enough where I feel great leaning on them throughout the rest of the season. Next up is from Storm. Is that really your name, or does it just apply to this question? The question is, how can Clemson adjust their passing game if the weather conditions this weekend get really bad? From Storm. That's interesting. But anyway, yeah, I think the biggest thing is just going to be able to make sure that we're not forcing a passing game, right? If Cade's not being able to grip the ball, don't keep trying it. Problems don't happen in Storm because you pass it. Problems happen when the weather's bad if you force it. If he comes out there and he's not able to grip, keep him where he's able to make sure he has a dry towel at all times, obviously, but don't try to force the long ball every play. Keep the safety passes, the short passes, the curl routes, slant routes across the middle. Hit those easy routine passes instead of making him open it all out. And the biggest thing is just lean on the rush game. Allow Phil Maffa to carry us on that. Keeping it going. This one is from Dan. What's been Clemson's biggest weakness on defense? How can they fix it? Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier on. The biggest one for me is the post-snap movements, getting into position, getting set ready. It seems like we're kind of playing behind the 8 ball. When motions are happening, when adjustments or audibles are called, it feels like we're taking a long time to get set. If a team comes out and they run an audible and they snap it immediately, we'll be in trouble because our cornerback's taking forever to get set. Linebackers are having a little bit of problems making sure they're in the right rotation. So that's the biggest thing to me, is making sure we can be quick and speedy with our decisions whenever post or pre-snap movement or audibles are happening. Next up is from Pam. Pam says, is Clemson still running for the college football playoff, or is it a long shot now? No, I think we're easily in the still running. If we come out, finish the season undefeated, except for that Georgia game, have a really good performance in the ACC championship, as long as whoever we're playing in that ACC championship has a really good season as well, I think win or lose, unless it's an embarrassing loss, we're in the playoffs. I think how Clemson's playing, say it's Miami, say Miami wins out, and it's them two. If that's a close competitive game, I think both of them make the tournament. One is the 3 seed or 4 seed in the 8 as the automatic big conference champion, and the other probably like the 10 or 11 seed. So, yeah, I think making the tournament is easily an option right now. And then the last question is from Brian. How do you think the running backs have performed? Who has been the most consistent so far? Yeah, I'm happy with our running backs. I think Phil Maffa has been excellent. I know he didn't play really well against Georgia, but yeah, I think he's been great. Honestly, Keith Adams has been a little disappointing for me. I wish I was going to be able to see more consistency, more great performances. He's kind of drew it out a little bit where he was the number 2 running back on the depth chart beginning of the season. Jay Haynes has took that spot over. So Jay Haynes has really impressed with me. I think, like we talked about a little in the season, being able to have Phil's more of a hybrid power back. You have Jay Haynes with that elusive back. That's a really nice 1-2 punch, really nice. They complement each other really well. So, yeah, we appreciate all those questions. Hey, make sure you're sending in questions. Whether or not we answer it right away might not be the same, but we do make sure we write these questions down and we will answer them. So send us a message on Twitter, drop a question on YouTube, or comment on one of our community posts. We would love to answer your questions in the next mailbag episode. But for now, that is going to be it for the Locked On Clemson podcast for today's episode. Thanks so much for making it your first listen. Go check out Locked On College Football Podcast. They have a lot of amazing stuff with their host, Spencer McCaughlin. You can find the link to that down in the episode notes before, so you don't have to search. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to dive deeper into the Stanford team, what we need to do, some final predictions. We win if this happens. Stanford wins if something else happens. We'll talk about all that and more tomorrow. Make sure you're part of our Locked On Clemson Insider program. You get a lot of benefits. Text Clemson to 864-252-1907. If you haven't, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast, whether Audible, over on podcast or Spotify, wherever, or on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. That way, every day, this can be your first listen here on Locked On Clemson Podcast. Make sure to check out other podcasts from the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Can't wait to see you on tomorrow's episode. Until then, keep that Tiger pride alive and roaring. And as always, go Tigers.